Today's video is all about John Mayer's use of JHS pedals. When I'd heard that Josh Scott was in this horrible biking accident, of course, the whole community was getting behind him and wishing him well, but I wanted to try and do something as well to show support for Josh, JHS pedals, and just, something more than just commenting on an Instagram post to wish him well. And then I thought, well, a fun video could be documenting, kind of sharing some tone examples of John Mayer's entire use of JHS pedals throughout the years. And Josh, if you too watch this, hopefully this is just kind of a fun trip down memory lane as well for you. And I stand for everyone when I say we all wish you the most speedy recovery, and we hope to see you back on YouTube making amazing videos and really great pedals very, very soon. So wishing you all the very best with your recovery, and I hope you and everyone else enjoys this video, John Mayer's use of JHS pedals. Now, to try and make this as easy as possible, we're mainly focusing on pedals as they appear within John's rig to try and reduce the amount of jumping around that there would be if we start every year, kind of what was going on. I'm mainly going to focus on the individual pedals as they've appeared in his rig, but there will be a couple of jumps here and there talking about the same pedals again. But for the most part, I'm going to try and keep it just with what pedals appeared in his rig in order. So we're going to start off in 2016 with this really interesting pedal board that John had. It was used for a couple of shows as well, as we actually saw it in the studio kind of during the Search for Everything sessions. Very much an experimental pedal board that John had with him. Some things he'd brought out kind of from the vault that he hadn't used in a couple of years. Some things that you would see on the board that were on this one here, but then you wouldn't see for a few years again and then kind of become mainstays. It's just pretty interesting where his headspace was with this pedal board. And the biggest performance that John used this pedal board with is the Roots Picnic in 2016. And as for JHS pedals, we have the debut of the JHS Prestige on John's pedal board, as well as the Twin 12 V2 with the red remote switch beside it between that and the TS10 on the pedal board as well. Now, because this pedal board only featured the duplex from Pete Cornish and the TS10 as well for the drive sounds, it's very likely that some of the tones we are hearing John use for Gravity, for example, for Roots Picnic, involves the Twin 12. Now, what I think is going on is that for Gravity, John has the Prestige being the clean boost to boost the pickups of the black one, boost that level up on the entire time. Then for that first solo, to me, it sounds like that would be the Twin 12 that John was using. It gets left on, he uses his dynamics with his right hand to make it all a bit quieter. Then for the final solo, he steps on the TS10 just to boost everything a lot more. Then that would create the solo tone that you're hearing. Without seeing John directly step on things, that's just what I have to kind of guess and estimate that he was doing.
Just keep me where the light is. New York City, just keep me where the light is.
2016 as well, John would perform with Alicia Keys doing a performance of Gravity. Instead of the black one though, we get a rare example of John using the 64 Strat for Gravity, and the pedal board setup was identical as well. So for the drives, I'm assuming kind of the same thing going on here. Prestige for a clean boost, TS10, and the Twin 12 as well to get that solo tone. Moving on to 2017, and we'd have the very first collaboration between John and Josh in the Kirkland Signature Double Boost. John would post on March 20th of 2017 before the Search for Everything tour kicked off saying, "Proud to endorse the Kirkland Signature guitar pedal. What does it do? It's a boost." And then another boost. That is all. There are other flashier pedals that do more nuanced things, but that's not what we're dealing with here. If you want your guitar signal to be louder, you just step on this. Does it have true bypass circuitry? I really can't imagine that it does, but if you feel compelled to ask that kind of question, this is probably not the pedal for you. It does what it says, and then it does it adequately. Thank you, JHS Pedals, for backing the Kirk Boys culture. Really cool to see this pedal come out, and I know Josh has kind of talked about it a little bit in one of the JHS show videos, but the exact circuitry that it is, I'm not 100% sure. It could be an evolution of the Prestige in both sides or something like that. Who knows? Maybe one day Josh might actually produce something that doesn't have the Kirkland name on it, but that's very much what this pedal actually is. And this one John would use on the 2017 board as well as the full 2019 touring pedal board too. And we have a really great example of him using the Kirkland as that final boost in 2019 for the Melbourne performance of Gravity. He just uses it and turns it on just to lift everything up as kind of that final stage, just to make everything louder at the very end of his signal chain. Really great example here that I'm going to play for you guys. And one other thing that John was doing during the Search for Everything World Tour is experimenting with a third overdrive to complement the Klon Centaur and the TS-10. The pedal that sat in this position on the board did evolve and change throughout the tour. I've kind of documented it in full what John was doing, the different pedals that were in this place at different time points. But in May of 2017, John was using the Charlie Brown V4 as his third overdrive, whether that was gain stacking with the TS-10 Klon Centaur and the Charlie Brown all in the mix. Using it individually, there's a lot of possibilities that could have been going on, and because John was using the Bradshaw custom audio electronic switching system, it's really impossible to tell for 100% certainty when the Charlie Brown was in the mix, but he did have it on the board for a little while, especially during the month of May. That was the flavor of choice at that point in time for the tour, so just really cool and important to note. All right, moving on to 2018, and we'd see John use the Bonsai live for the very first time. There's this awesome screenshot from his story when he got one saying every household should have one, and they really should. And I absolutely love the fact that the selector knob for the TS variant is on TS-10. Of course, that's going to be the one clearly that John would probably be using. And when John joined Shawn Mendes in 2018 for the performance of Where Were You in the Morning, the only drive he had on his pedal board was the Bonsai. So that is what you were hearing for John's solo tone. And the Way Huge Octopus Mark III, just making note of, was on for this entire performance as well. So let's take a listen to John's killer drive tone for this performance. Skipping ahead to 2024, we'd see John using the Bonsai live again when he would join Zack Bryan. He brought with him another small pedal board that had the core essentials on it. It consisted of the Keeley Katana, a mystery pedal that definitely is not the Jeff Archer because that pedal is physically smaller than the Bonsai, and this pedal is actually bigger, or at least the same size, so it's very hard to tell exactly what John had with him for that middle pedal, assuming something Klon-ish. And then he had the Bonsai and the Strymon Flint, but you can guarantee that the Bonsai was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for John's overdriven tone for this performance. It's just a matter of if like the Katana or this other pedal was pushed into it as well for a little bit of gain stacking. Moving on now to my favorite modern era for John's tone, the 2019 World Tour. And Josh would join John at the rehearsals for the 2019 World Tour. This shot you guys are seeing is one that actually Josh took and posted to his own personal Instagram. And this is when we know now that John had asked Josh to clone both the Dumble Boxylator and BBC1. And then we're going to get into that whole kind of thing a little bit later on. But it's kind of cool to note that that was what was going on at this point. They'd be collaborating again on another thing. What's kind of interesting to note about the rehearsals for the 2019 World Tour is that for all of the rehearsal shows, John had the pulp and peel on his pedal board as the compressor, but then as well, he was experimenting, it looks like, with a couple of different JHS pedals for the rehearsals and other pedals as well. People who I know went to these rehearsal shows mentioned that John had just a ton of pedals that he seemed to be kind of experimenting with and had like drawers full of them off to the side or something like that. So clearly experimenting with what he's going to actually be bringing with them on for the tour. But there is the JHS Clover and the Haunting Mids, and then one of the actual like AB selectors as well. You see on the floor there. Just trust me, that is what he had there. So just kind of in the mix experimenting with, and the Clover is a pedal that I've always wanted to try out as a massive fan of the Edge. Obviously that's based on the Boss FA1 that the Edge has used for a very, very long time. So that is one JHS pedal that I haven't tried out yet, but I really want to get my hands on. So just kind of cool to see John with it. And fun fact as well, the Shinai Companion Psychedelic Amplifier machine that John uses for I Guess I Just Feel Like, that's right there where the Clover is actually sitting on. You know, the huge mystery of John's tone that was kind of right in front of us the whole time, but not quite at the same points. But kind of, you know, important to note that for rehearsals, these pedals were kind of around the mix, the pulp and peel being the main one that actually, you know, we see was on the board the entire time, not the Clover or the Haunting Mids. But I just wanted to mention because it's kind of cool. You do see that they are there. For NAMM 2021, Martin Guitars would host the Jam in Place, where John would perform remotely from this kind of studio setup he had going on in his living room with everything going on at that kind of point in time. And this is the very first time we would actually see the box set later. There was this mystery JHS pedal on the floor, and you could clearly tell it had the JHS logo stamped on that kind of front-facing bottom side of it. You know what I'm talking about, where you see that. But then as well, there was some sort of 1966 series fuzz, kind of the custom hand-built ones that Josh used to make. And it looks like the Italy, but it's very hard to tell exactly what it was, but that's the pedal that it definitely seems to be. So maybe John was recording some tracks at home in the studio with the amp setup and everything he had going on that would eventually land on Sob Rock. Hard to say, obviously, but what else would kind of be going on there but John experimenting at least with tones and tracks for his upcoming record, maybe trying to do more at home instead of going into the studio with social distancing and everything like that. But definitely cool to note, and maybe Josh can provide a little bit more context on that as well.
It's not a silly little moment. It's not the storm before the calm. This is the deep and dying breath of this love that we've been working on. Can't seem to hold you like I want to, so I can.
Okay, and at this point in 2021, I do want to jump back to the Prestige, because with Dead & Company 2021 forward, the Prestige has been very heavily used as a boost. It's kind of one of John's main boosts with Dead & Company within the past like 4 years, really. The Dire Wolf solo is a really great example of John using it as a boost. Now, because of nugs and even just posting audio with Dead & Company is very, very hard to talk about at all and discuss even for a few moments because of the whole copyright thing I've talked about it a few times on the channel, but that's just the reality. It's very, very difficult to actually, talk about that stuff without it getting flagged just at all, even for like 5 seconds. But there's a screenshot here that I have for the solo, John clearly stepping on the Prestige for the boost, and then we're going to listen to and watch some audience footage, just a little bit that I'll probably be able to play for you guys, but one example of John using the Prestige with Dead & Company. All right, now we are getting on into the Sob Rock era, and we have the Palladium show that kicked off this entire era. The very first show of the Sob Rock era, but not officially part of the Sob Rock tour, kind of like the 2019 rehearsals in a way, where this was very much an experimental pedal board that John would then adjust before the actual Sob Rock tour. But for this first show, a couple of things going on. The first being that the JHS Legends of Fuzz Supreme was on John's pedal board, and this just guaranteed was there to do the fuzz tone for I Guess I Just Feel Like. It's a clone interpretation of the Super Fuzz, which is the fuzz circuit that John has used for I Guess I Just Feel Like, but it wasn't performed this night. And then for the actual tour, John didn't have the Supreme on it, and whether that was due to kind of a spacing issue as well, or he just went back to the original Shinai Companion psychedelic amplifier machine unit with one of those Keeley true bypass switchers like he did during the 2019 World Tour or something. It's hard to know for 100% certainty what John was doing for Sob Rock, but the Supreme was very much in the conversation and something John did experiment with, but then seems to at least have gone back to that original kind of setup that he had for 2019. And on this pedal board as well, there is a 3 series pedal, but it's very hard to tell exactly which one this is. We are assuming it's some sort of modulation because it was in the loop of the Exotic X blender along with the Boss CE2. So if he was kind of blending in different modulations or testing them out or something, maybe a chorus or something else, who knows? But John also had that going on with the X blender and the CE2 for just the Palladium show. Okay, now at this point here, we can start talking about the box it later, and I've made a handful of videos dedicated to just this one pedal, one whole video talking about kind of everything we know with the box it later, so I don't want to get into a ton of detail here, but this really is kind of, I'd almost say, John's unofficial signature pedal that he's kind of developed. It's the closest thing we've really ever had to it, where this pedal has become one that John has used so much since Josh actually built it for him. It started off kind of with Dead & Company a little bit, and then you see it evolve and actually be used on really every main pedal board that John has had basically since like 2022, 2023 timeline-ish. John's used it an absolute ton. Now, it is a clone of the Dumble, a Boxlator, a super rare Dumbleator rack unit and a pedal. It acts as a line driver. It's got a send and return effects loop in it and a clean boost as well. And John has seemingly used the effects loop, we can know that function of it as well, but then also as a pure tonal clean boost function, which is really cool that this pedal can do so much. Now, the funny thing about the box it later is that even though it's been on John's pedal boards so much in recent years, we've never had the best footage to give us a bit more context into examples of how John is actually using it until the 40th anniversary celebration of PRS guitars. Now, for this performance of Wild Blue, you'll see John use the Klon Centaur to kick off the first solo, then step on the box it later to give it that boost that it needs, just a little bit more of a volume jump. Then the Klon Centaur comes off, and then John would eventually keep the box later. He keeps it on the entire performance, but then the TS10 is what he uses for the outro solo with the box later pushing everything as well, giving it just that tone enhancement and that boost as well from the very unique circuit that this thing does. And it really seems to be something that I'm not saying it's going to replace the Keeley Katana necessarily, but it's a new tool that John is relying on so much. And I know with the Not a Dumble that Josh and JHS Pedals built, the first version at least didn't end up having the box it later's clean boost circuit inside of it, but it sounds like Josh might make the next version of that pedal with the clean boost of the box it later, or even, I hope, produce the box it later at some point. But it really seems to be a key part of John's kind of more recent modern tone. So let's take a listen to this example now. Okay, now in 2023 for Dead & Company's final tour, we would see a JHS 3 Series pedal be added, and I believe this is the phaser because a phase 90 or some sort of phaser was always a pretty consistent component on every pedal board John used with Dead & Company, and this is the only pedal that really could provide that phaser tone for John. And you can hear during this example of Crazy Fingers, there's clearly phase going on in it. I really honestly think it only could be this 3 Series pedal, so I am just convinced. I'm saying it's a 3 Series phaser. As well, in 2023, we would have the artificial blonde be added to John's pedal board, and this would also be consistent for the shows at the Sphere. John would have the artificial blonde doing some just really cool jammy vibrato tones with. There is Playing in the Band June 3rd, 2023, which is a pretty good example, and I also believe this is the first show that John actually put the artificial blonde on his pedal board. Just one example where you can kind of hear that vibrato doing its thing and in the Dead & Company context. And then just a short while ago from me making this video, John would make a video talking about the 424 gain stage in support of Josh and kind of helping to promote his new pedal with Josh being unable to and just really needing to obviously focus on his recovery. So we see John using this pedal and talking about it here. And then the artificial blonde was also used a bit. It sounds like John kind of mentions as well, or just for a very kind of subtle piece of modulation he had it set. It can kind of be hard to hear when you watch it. So I'm not exactly sure the context from John's video as well, but the artificial blonde was there.
So I've got the 424 gain stage, I've got the artificial blonde going straight into the DI. There's no other tricks, a little bit of reverb, and that's it. It just makes you want to play. This is where I want to get into the breakup of the 424. Josh wanted me to play some grunge. So let's turn up the gain all the way on the second and the first. So that is trim all the way up, channel all the way up. This is Good Love is on the way if Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam played it.
That's kind of the history of John using JHS pedals. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And Josh, if you did watch this, I hope it just was fun to sit back and watch and, you know, spend a little bit of time, you know, giving you something new to kind of watch for your YouTube viewership. I'm sure during your recovery, you're just getting tired of watching shows or just needing stuff to do. I know it kind of can be, you know, just the resting and recovery part can be pretty difficult as well. So I thought this would be cool and everyone else might enjoy it as well. Obviously would enjoy it as well. And yeah, just wishing you all the best in a very, very speedy recovery. The last thing I need to mention is a shout out to Moose Guitars on Instagram, who helped me out a ton with a lot of the Dead & Company examples and context. He's a lot more of a Dead & Company expert than I am. So to have him be able to provide some assistance and some really great examples of these pedals being used in that context, I definitely could not have made this video as good without him. So shout out to Matt, Moose Guitars. He'll be linked in the description down below as well. Josh, all the best. I hope your recovery is very quick and we get back to seeing you on YouTube very, very soon. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you on the next video.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.